Well, good evening, Hampton. Are we fired up? Let me first thank Congressman Bobby Scott. During the ideological shutdown in Washington, he was fighting for Virginia. Folks, we could not have a better member of Congress fighting for Virginia than our own Bobby Scott. And I'd also like to thank my great friend Leo Gerard from the Steelworkers, who has spent his lifetime fighting to make sure that folks are protected, and no one has fought harder for working families than Leo Gerard. I thank Leo and all the Steelworkers. And I want to thank our great mayor, George Walsh, who is hosting us in Hampton. I am so proud to have his support. Full disclosure, his son in Northern Virginia is my son, Peter, my 11-year-old's football coach. So, George, we'd like to see a little more playing time if we could. I know our great party chair, Charnel Herring. Where is Charnel? There she is. Give her a great round of applause. We thank her. And, of course, my running mate, the next Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mark Herring, is in the house with us tonight. You know, folks, there have been a lot of scary headlines we've seen in the newspapers recently regarding Virginia: sequestration, cuts, shutdowns, drawdowns. And the truth is that even as we worry about the future, many Virginians are still hurting from the Great Recession. While our economy has been slowly recovering, there are still way too many Virginians who worry every night about whether they can afford quality health care or a quality education. Not all the lost jobs have come back, and there are still Virginians working 2 or 3 jobs just to get by every single day. New economic headwinds only add urgency to our need to create jobs. As a kid who grew up in a middle-class family, I understand these concerns. When I knew I'd have to help pay for college, I started a business paving neighborhood driveways with the help of my mother and barrels of tar from Kmart. That opportunity to succeed is what we want to make sure every Virginian has. For too many Virginians, there are still too many obstacles. I am running with an incredible ticket. Mark Herring for Attorney General and Ralph Northam for Lieutenant Governor. They have devoted their lives to fighting for middle-class families on jobs and education. Let me say this, folks. We're proud to be Democrats. But we're also proud that our ticket is in the mainstream of Virginia. And this mainstream ticket is laser focused on the issues that matter to most Virginians: less traffic, great schools, economic opportunity for the middle class. Before we get into some of the important differences in this race, I wanted to take a moment and talk about one issue that has been on everyone's mind: the government shutdown. The government shutdown that we just went through was driven by a few Tea Party members of Congress. The impact of that has already been grave on the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it's not just the federal workers who were impacted. How about all the small stores, the grocery stores, the moms and pops, the restaurants? Tourism has been affected. And here in Virginia, as you know, we were hit harder than any other state in the country. I visited one company recently in Tyson's Corner. 200 workers had to stay home because the federal contracts had been paused. That's devastating for our larger economy, but folks, it's also devastating for our families. The idea that a mom or dad should have to tell their children that they can't work because of congressional dysfunction is a national disgrace. Just recently, my opponent, Ken Cuccinelli, was campaigning at a gathering of his supporters with Ted Cruz. The Tea Party senator from Texas who is known as the architect of the shutdown. Ken Cuccinelli had an opportunity to stand up for Virginia jobs, to tell the Texas senator to stop hurting Virginia's economy. Instead, he was silent. He refused to stand up for Virginia and against Ted Cruz's shutdown strategy. Ken Cuccinelli was apparently more concerned with his reputation with the Tea Party than ending the government shutdown that was undermining Virginia's economy. Ken's new campaign slogan is "Fighting for Virginia." But after that event with Ted Cruz, it's pretty clear, folks, that was exactly what it was, a slogan. And it's not just the shutdown. Ken Cuccinelli is always focused on issues that divide Virginians: attacking women's health care access, the Social Security that you've paid into, and scientific research. I am focused on issues that bring Virginians together: improving education and creating jobs. The Tea Party ticket proposes an ideological and irresponsible tax plan that could lead to a budget crisis and devastating cuts to education. And now, E.W. Jackson says that he and Cuccinelli support completely eliminating the corporate income tax in Virginia. Our mainstream ticket thinks that the budget should be based on common sense, fiscal responsibility, and investing in our shared priorities like the best education system. Their Tea Party ticket views bipartisanship as betrayal and oppose the transportation compromise that will allow all of us to start reducing gridlock for our families. Our mainstream ticket views bipartisanship as a necessity because issues like jobs, transportation, and education are not partisan issues. Their Tea Party ticket is proposing an education plan that would divert money away from public schools. Our mainstream ticket believes that we have to invest in schools, students, and teachers if we want our children to succeed. A few weeks after the 2012 election, Ken Cuccinelli gave a speech to discuss what he thought had gone wrong for the Republicans in the election and what they could do to correct it. It was his first big appearance since he secured the nomination for governor. He started out by attacking those who say that the Republican Party should try and appeal to the middle. He said Virginians don't want, don't need, and sure as heck cannot afford a more moderate Republican Party. Ken Cuccinelli said that this election is about showing that conservatism isn't dead. Well, folks, let me say this. I say this election is about creating jobs. We create jobs and move Virginia forward by bringing people together and focusing on the right issues. When we know that the jobs of the future require specialized skills, we need to invest in making our community colleges the engines of workforce training in Virginia. I've been to all 23 community colleges, and they are a pathway for success for our middle class, helping workers gain new skills for a new economy. When we know that science, technology, engineering, and math skills will be in high demand, we have to reform the standards of learning so that our schools are actually measuring progress on those subjects and not just teaching memorization. When we know that there is still discrimination in the Commonwealth, we have to work hard to make sure that there is treated equally all individuals in the Commonwealth, especially those in our criminal justice system, and that once you have served your time, you can regain your right to vote. When we know that 400,000 Virginians could gain access to quality health care through the new Medicaid expansion, we must accept the Medicaid expansion in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is Virginia money coming back to Virginia, and it will create 30,000 new jobs. My opponent is opposed to accepting this expansion. The other day, he actually called Medicaid, quote, outright welfare. It's similar to his view of Medicare and Social Security, which he said were created by bad politicians to make people dependent upon the government. Well, let me say this to Ken Cuccinelli. My mother is 91 years old. She has paid into Social Security her whole life. This is her money, and she's not dependent on anyone. So he says he doesn't want to accept the Medicaid expansion, but then he also complains about Virginians who, quote, clog up emergency rooms. And he was the sole sponsor of legislation, which was opposed by the hospitals, that would allow emergency rooms to fingerprint individuals who were not able to pay their bills immediately. Fingerprint. Think about that. He opposes getting 400,000 Virginians covered by bringing Virginians' money back to Virginia. So he opposes getting these 400,000 folks quality health care. But if they then have to go to an emergency room to get medical care, they could be fingerprinted. Let me be clear, folks. His agenda is way out there. I will tell you that. It was the Republican Lieutenant Governor, Bill Bolling, who said of his own party, quote, "This is not just the most conservative ticket, it is the most ideologically driven ticket that we have seen in the history of our state." Over the last days of this campaign, the Tea Party is going to spend their time trying to make this election about personal attacks on me instead of policy differences. They know that if this election is about the issues that matter to Virginians, they cannot win. That's why I need your help now more than ever. All of you in this room worked so incredibly hard in 2012. Even with the millions spent on television ads in Virginia, everyone who looked at last year's election agrees that it was grassroots energy and turnout that mattered most. For those of you who worked so hard in 2012 and haven't signed up yet for the campaign, we need your help. And for all of those of you who are already working very hard on the campaign, we need you to dig just a little bit deeper. Over the next week, the most important thing we can do is face-to-face conversations with voters, asking them and talking to them about the stakes in this election, and make sure that they have a plan to vote. That's why we call it Get Out the Vote, GOTV. I have a card here, folks. Everyone in this audience, let me see your cards. I hope we all have a card. You need to sign up and do a shift. We need to make sure everybody's working. You can sign up with our organizers, or if you get home tonight and you're really bored, you can fire up TerryMcAuliffe.com and you can sign up right, do it that way. But we need your help, folks. You can sign up and volunteer tonight. I promise you, if you work hard for us over the course of the next week, I promise you, Mark Herring, Ralph Northam, and Terry McAuliffe will work our hearts out for you for the next 4 years. I remember it got dark last November just before 6 o'clock as I showed up at the Montrose Elementary School in Henrico County. I'd been asked by the president's campaign to go out. There were long lines. The polls were just closing. It was dark and it was chilly. I was there to hand out hand warmers, hot cocoa, coffee, and snacks to encourage folks to stay in line. But you know what? Not one single person left that line. Not even families with school-aged children. For them, voting was too important for their families, for their children, and their communities. They were not about to let anyone silence them or take away their right to have their voices heard. Folks, we need that intensity again this year because we cannot afford to turn backwards. We must keep Virginia a leader in higher education. We must attract the best jobs in the world. We must expand health coverage for 400,000 Virginians. We must invest in education, in our teachers and our students. We must protect voting rights for all Virginians. We must be a state where gay Virginians are treated equally. And we must ensure that women have access to the quality health care that they deserve. Are you ready to go? Thank you for everything that you are about to do. Now, the leader who is joining with us today showed America what can happen when we focus on the economy and work with both parties. He brought together both sides to achieve a balanced budget and make government more efficient. That led to record surpluses and, just as important, record low poverty. As president, he oversaw the creation of 22 million new jobs in this country, the biggest economic expansion in modern history. But for him, it wasn't about the numbers. It was about the hard-working families in Hampton and Henrico and Harrisonburg. That's why he fought so hard for the historic Family and Medical Leave Act, which allows parents to take time to care for a newborn without threat of losing their job. And that's why he fought for Pell Grants and new teachers to give every child a chance, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or where they were born. He understands the struggles of middle-class families because he's lived them. He was raised by a single mom in Arkansas and was able to afford college with scholarships and hard work. He has never forgotten where he came from, and he has never forgotten hard-working families. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to bring back to Virginia the 42nd President of the United States of America, Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the welcome. You know, you guys got to go easy on me. I'm a little out of practice here. I want to thank Mayor Wallace for welcoming us here, and Mayor Price from Newport News, and Leo Gerard, thank you for your leadership of the steelworkers and for working people everywhere. And my longtime friend, Congressman Bobby Scott, who did cast the deciding vote on my economic plan. When we reversed trickle-down economics worked, and it went pretty well for us, didn't it? I want to thank Senator Mark Herring for running for Attorney General. And now, I want to tell you something, folks. That is an important job. And it's a really important job if you're worried about having somebody who's ideological, who will resolve every political question in favor of his ideology instead of the law. Their party used to say they were for strict construction. Now they're for a strict outcome. And I was an attorney general, and I was a governor, so I'm an informed participant tonight. But I always say, attorney general is the best job you can have. You know why? Unlike the governor, you don't have to hire or fire. You don't have to appoint anybody, so you don't have to disappoint anybody. And if you do something really unpopular, you just blame it on the Constitution. He's a good man. I want you to make sure he wins this race. It's important. Delegate Herring, thank you for being here. Madam Chairman, thank you. I want to introduce the most important person here to me, Terry's wife, Dorothy. I say that I'm here for personal reasons, philosophical reasons, and policy reasons. I love Terry McAuliffe and his wife and his 5 kids. Our families have vacationed together. I've watched his kids grow up. Today I just saw his big strapping son, who's a rugby player in his 3rd year at the Naval Academy, preparing to serve our country, and his 8th grade daughter and his son Peter, who wants more playing time, as you heard. His other 2 daughters are off at college. And so I know him. and I'd be here if he were 50 points behind instead of about to be your next governor. But but this election is about way more than that. It's really about you and your kids and your future. And there's a real choice. I mean, whoever decided, whenever, that Virginia would kind of put itself on the map by electing governors in the year after we had a presidential election, and only New Jersey does that besides you, that's pretty clever. Gets you a lot of free press. And you're really getting it this year because you have two genuinely interesting candidates who are wildly different. And it's really important that you understand what that means for your life. Terry's opponent, as you've heard, said the problem with the Republican Party is it wasn't far enough right and he wanted to take it out there. A place for only the pure and the strong and the always right, literally. Now, the problem with being an ideologue is that the facts no longer matter to you. For example, he sued a college professor in Virginia. Here you have this fabulous system of higher education, which is a huge part of your economy. The guy wants to do a scientific study of climate change, and he'd already decided that there wasn't anything to it, as if he knew. And therefore, the guy was wasting your money doing what you hired him to do, which is to look at unresolved questions and find the answers to things. And that's a good symbol for the difference. It's good to have a philosophy, and we need two parties. It's good to have people that are generally more sympathetic with the interests of working people and poor people, and it's good to have people who are generally worried about making sure the economy works for business, and it's good to have arguments because nobody's right all the time, except they think they are, the ideologues. And this can have enormous practical consequences for you. They love to criticize Terry and say, oh, he's a deal maker. Remember what we just went through in Washington? I'd say, oh, give me one. Give me one, just one good deal maker. The framers of the Constitution, who were disproportionately concentrated in Virginia, had certain strong convictions, one of which is that nobody is right all the time. So we would have a separation of powers and inherent limits to keep people from abusing them. The other was to make it a little harder than normal to pass bills and do other things so that people would have to get together and government would have to be more inclusive and people would work together and nobody could be shut out. In other words, you could have subtitled the Constitution, The Art of the Deal. Compromise, principle compromise is a moral position. It is not an immoral position. It is not an amoral position. It simply recognizes that nobody's right all the time. Your life is as important as mine. Your opinion's entitled to the same respect mine is. And we're all in this together, so we might as well work together to row this boat and go somewhere. And so that's why Terry talks about where he wants to go. Look at America today. We got to implement this health care law. The computer deal will get fixed up. Don't worry about that. Everybody's forgotten, by the way, that when President George W. Bush, a Republican, put that Medicare Part D drug program in, it was more unpopular than the health care law, and they had terrible problems with the computers. Some seniors couldn't even get medicine they had been getting. And the local pharmacists basically got together and made sure they stayed alive till the computers got fixed. But our side, we're not so ideological, so instead of bashing them and screaming about how incompetent they were, most of our people just tried to help people understand the law and make it work and then wait for it to get fixed. Big difference in being an ideologue and being practical. Putting people first as opposed to some abstract philosophy first. So that'll get worked out. But there is a global, I travel the world, you know, my foundation sells the world's cheapest medicine for AIDS and malaria. We sell in 70 countries. We have big farming operations and helping little farmers little farmers have an acre of land that they farm with a hoe. Little farmers in Africa. I travel all over the world. Everywhere I see there is a global shortage of jobs for young people in America and around the world. In America, we have an extra problem, which is why the community colleges are so important, which is we have a whole lot of people who are in their middle years who need to work another 15 or 20 years to take care of their families. And if they don't have education beyond high school in this sluggish economy, they have a hard time ever finding a job again. And then the longer people are out of work, the more reluctant employers are to hire them. Now, these are real problems of real people. This ought to be what the government is working with the private sector to fix. And you heard Terry talk to you about being 14 and starting this business, paving his neighbor's driveway. The truth is he got to pave some across town. I'm still trying to figure out how he got permission to drive a pickup truck at 14. But anyway, you know, even everybody's got to airbrush the story a little bit. Actually, I do know how. He had an understanding uncle who sometimes drove him. Anyway, this is a big deal. This economic thing is terrible. Median family income, the one in the middle, after you adjust for inflation, is lower than it was the day I left office. That was a long time ago. And we need somebody who wants to do something about it. You also have to prepare the people to do the jobs of tomorrow, because if you want incomes to rise again, you have to do two things. You got to create more jobs and more businesses and help businesses expand, and you have to change the job mix, which is why all this technology and science and building proper infrastructure is important, because you want to keep having a higher and higher percentage of your jobs that pay better every year. Hardly any state in the country is better positioned than Virginia. You got the higher education network, you got the community college network. You basically have a public education system that's making real progress. But you got to do the right things. And no one can know all the time what the right thing is. That's why we need to make these decisions together. Every stop today I've made in Virginia, I've told this story. One of my favorite books I've read in the last several years is a book called The Wisdom of Crowds by an American journalist named James Surowiecki. And I'll tell you in a sentence what the book says to save you the price of buying it. He basically says that groups of people who are affected and interested by something make better decisions than some person acting alone. That diversity is a strength, that different points of view matter in solving practical problems. And he said there's worlds of studies that show, for example, if we could do an instantaneous IQ check here and take the person in this room right now with the highest IQ, take them outside and give them a special room, plenty of coffee, and we all stayed here, and then somebody fed into us and to the genius, let's say 25 questions, over time, we would make better decisions than the genius. Because that's why democracy works. That's why shared decision-making works. That's why inclusion is good. That's why cooperation beats conflict every day of the week. So, I knew Terry was on to something nearly a year ago when he told me he was determined to visit every community college in the state. Why? Because they're a symbol of how we ought to work. Think about it. It's open enrollment. Doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're a man or a woman, what your race is, what your religion is, whether you're gay or straight, nothing matters. You go and you perform or you don't, and if you perform, you get certified and you become more employable, right? And they decide every semester what should be taught based on what's happening in the economy to maximize your chances of getting a job if you get your degree. And for those who want to go into four-year colleges, that you can do that and prepare to do that. One of the things that I hate the most about this student debt problem and all these economic problems is that now you even have a high dropout rate from the community colleges. And so solving all this is a practical challenge. There's no right or left way to do this. You either believe more people should get a better education K through 12 and should have access to going to college, or you don't. You believe that something should be done to reduce the dropout rate, or you don't. You believe that the government should be doing more to make sure that the system works well to attract the maximum number of jobs, or you don't. You want a governor to wake up every morning thinking about how he can put more Virginians to work, or you don't. That's what this is about. Now, and it is hard work, but you have resources. When I became the governor of Arkansas in 1983, we had been gutted with a farm crisis, and the manufacturing base in the middle of America was being hollowed out. And we had nowhere near the assets that you have now. It took me almost 9 years from always having an unemployment rate above the national average until the year that I coincidentally happened to run for president. We led the nation in job growth. It makes a difference if you focus on the objective to empower people to live their dreams and to give them the tools and the support and the conditions to do that. It makes a difference. And look, I don't know how this fighting is going to play out in Washington, but I do know this. If you have a governor who cares about expanding the economy and expanding opportunities for ordinary people and making sure they're prepared to take the opportunities through education and training, then if nothing happens in Washington, it'll still be way better here than it otherwise would. And if they get their act together and start working together, then you will progress more rapidly than other states and more rapidly than you otherwise would. This is a huge deal. The stakes are very high. And why are we doing this 9 days from the election? I'm glad to see you, and I love coming down here. But we're doing this because the matter is still in doubt. How could it be in doubt? You all see these polls. They say Terry's winning, blah, blah, blah. What they don't tell you is this. One of the principal contributors to the political gridlock in Washington and to all this divide is that a different America shows up to vote in presidential years and in the years when Virginia elects its governor and lieutenant governor and attorney general, and then next year when all the House members and 1/3 of the Senate is up in Virginia and in other states, governors and state legislatures. In other words, there is still a stunning number of people in America who think that to be a good citizen, they only need to vote in presidential elections. And then they wonder why they're not getting along, because two different electorates show up. I mean, make no mistake about it, folks. You all applauded when Terry said he wanted to protect your voting rights. That's what this is all about. They're trying to make it hard for people who vote in presidential years to vote in presidential years. So the presidential years will look more like the off years. We got to make the off years look more like the presidential years. That's what's going on here. In 2008 and in 2012, 72% of the registered voters in Virginia cast ballots. In 2009, the last governor's race, you know what the number was? 40%. 1/3 of the electorate said, I think I'll stay home today. Well, do you have an opinion? Yeah. Do you care what happens? Oh, sure. I just can't be bothered. That's really why we're all here. We're all here. That's why Terry was waving this, and Hillary told me she did, and I've got to. I do better when I take orders in my old age. We're laughing, but that's it. It's Sunday. We got several ministers here. They will know what I say when I am fully aware that I have been here preaching to the choir. We're converted. But I'm not 100% positive that 100% of you are going to show up. And I am 100% positive that if you took it on yourself, every single one of you could get 10 more people to go who might otherwise not vote. That's what this is all about. The one political virtue of extremism is this. If you can really get people all hot and bothered and their insides in knots, full of anger, steam coming out of their ears instead of a light bulb going off in their brains, they're angry and they just want to hurt somebody, they will vote. They'll show up every time. And if they catch you napping, they will beat you even if more people favor your position. That's what this whole thing's about. That's what this rally's about. That's what these cards are about. It's so you can believe, you can imagine. I looked at all of you while Terry was talking. I know you share those dreams. I know you share those ambitions. I know you like the plans. I know you want to see that course taken by the Commonwealth of Virginia. It all depends on whether you show up and who all you can drag with you. If you outperform what Virginians did 4 years ago, you got the deal you want. If you say, boy, I sure hope that turns out all right. I hope the other people, whoever the other people are, will do the right thing, but I can't be bothered. Then all this is just whistling a song. Let me tell you something. I'm not running for anything. And I can't imagine how I got as old as I am. I'm the oldest of the baby boomers. Most of my life I was the youngest person doing whatever I was doing. One day I woke up and I was the oldest fellow in every room. And I couldn't tell you for the life of me what happened in between. Except it was a fine ride, and I'm glad for it. But let me tell you, here's what I know. Here's what I know, and here's why I would never be in the camp with the ideologues. Even when members of my own party sometimes thought I was mistaken to listen to and visit with people in the other party, I always did it. I said, you know, they can't possibly be wrong about everything, and we can't possibly be right about everything. And we're all Americans. We have to at least treat each other with respect and try to learn from one another and find some way to work together. And it worked pretty well. Now, here's what I know. When you're done, there's only 3 things that matter if you have one of these jobs. And Terry McAuliffe will think about this every day. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? Do children have a brighter future? And are we going forward together, or are we being torn apart? If you can give the right answer to those 3 things, Virginia will be just fine. I will make you a prediction. You beat that 40% turnout rate 9 days from now. After Terry McAuliffe's been governor for a year, half the people who voted against him will wonder what they were thinking. He will be immensely popular. People will see he meant what he said. They will see what kind of person he is. They will see what kind of governor he is. And Virginia will feel that you're on the move again. Only you can do this. And it all depends on whether you can translate your presence here to your presence at the polling place and drag as many people as you can with you. Thank you, and God bless you.